thank you and welcome to the show today. The topic this morning is racism and the Tuskegee Airmen. And we're fortunate to have with us to talk about racism and the Tuskegee Airmen, Alana McLaughlin. And I think most of us will recognize that Alana has been with us on a number of occasions. And I think we can say the same thing about the racism and the Tuskegee Airmen show that we're about to do, that this is entirely her idea. And of course, Alana, let me welcome you to the show this morning and to tell you how delighted we are to have you. And as I indicated to our guests this morning, that you've been with us a number of occasions, and we've had an opportunity to talk to you about a number of things. But this topic this morning, racism and the Tuskegee Airmen, seems to be a topic that might be beyond an 8-year-old or 9-year-old child, but of course we'll have an opportunity to demonstrate that, or either see you to live beyond that in a few minutes. But first, let's talk about you and your background, and give us some information in reference to your education and those things that were important in terms of eventually leading you to us, because you've been with us, well, 5 or 7, at least 7 times prior to this time. Let's talk about that.
Well, as most of you probably know, my name is Alana McLaughlin. My mother is Cheryl Lynn Haney, and my father is Michael Leon McLaughlin. Now, my grandmother is Mildred Jacqueline Haney, and my grandfather is Reverend Dr. James Haney. I grew up in the church. I really like to kind of serve God in my own way, from dancing and being in the choir to reading scriptures and such. Also in school, I've started a anti-bullying program in which we try to convince people to stop bullying, because I don't think anybody should have to go through bullying, because that can lead to suicide, and nobody deserves to have that precious life taken away from them.
Very good, and of course, the information that you have for us this morning, Alana, has to do with racism. Why don't you start us off by making some statements in reference to racism?
Well, racism is basically when a Caucasian person kind of teases, or like I mentioned earlier, bullies an African American child or somebody in a different race. Now, my experiences with racism have been limited, but it still has been. Well, once I was in school and there was these bullies, and they would always try to hang out with the Caucasian people, white, and they would always try to make fun of black people because we originate from slaves and come from Africa, and we weren't as wealthy as the Caucasian man. But I think that's unfair, because, like I was saying about bullying, nobody deserves to be treated like that. I mean, to be treated like dirt, like slavery. Nobody deserves to be treated like that, because the thing is, what if the white man was in the slave's shoes? How would he feel about it? He has to think of it from their perspective. He has to think about it in their eyes. He has to look at them. He has to explain it to they have to explain it to the white man, to basically say that I'm in terrible pain, and if you were in this, what would you do?
Okay, but now, Alana, I think that you've already indicated that this whole idea of racism has something to do with slavery. Now, how would you connect racism and slavery? Because I think Africans were enslaved for more than 300 years, and that might have had something to do with this attitude of racism, primarily toward many of them. Say something in reference to that.
Well, slavery is a type of racism how do I explain this? When white people think they're better than African Americans because we originate from Africa, and like I said, we weren't too rich, we weren't too wealthy. But nobody should be a slave. I mean, that's my opinion on slavery. I mean, I feel strongly about slavery as the next guy, but I'm just trying to get the word out that slavery is wrong, and I'm glad it's abolished. I'm glad that Abraham Lincoln said no more, and I'm glad about that.
Now, while slavery ended, I think you would also admit that the idea of racism did not come to an end, and I think that you've got some information in reference to that from a book, the text that you're going to read during this next segment. After we come back, I want you to do that. But essentially what you're saying is that it is wrong whoever, whatever individual might be to practice what you're now calling racism, and we'll eventually talk about racism and the Tuskegee Airmen. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, and another kind of example of racism is Andrew Jackson had a niece, and he gave the niece a slave for her birthday, and she threw a fit because she was against slavery and she just didn't like it.
Okay, and of course, Alana, we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break.